Hey y'all, it is Misconceptions and my friend Belle Antoinette, and today's joint adventure is gonna be about asexuality, basically.
Yeah, the forbidden sexuality that no one's allowed to talk about or be,
You're
I
certainly
guess.
not allowed to talk about it, advocate for it, identify with it. It's mythical. There's
Which
no
is
such thing.
fascinating because it hurts literally no one. It doesn't affect anyone else but you.
Well, I
So
mean, what if you like had a husband and you like loved him and he really wanted sex? Then would you just want to emotionally abuse him? Is that what you want to do to your husband?
you want to tell him marry someone who wants that too. That's what you want to do. You want to get a divorce? So neither of
Yeah,
you are going to be happy?
that does seem like it would be a start. That kind of reminds me of when I went to a gynecologist back in yonder years when I was in my 20s. And, you know, I was still having sex that I wasn't interested in with people because I'm a nice girl. And, I basically said that because I don't want kids, like, can I get my tubes out or something like that? And she was like, well, what if you like, get married and your husband wants kids? And I was like, well, why, why would the love of my life be someone who wants to do something completely differently with his life? Like, that would be why he wasn't my husband, yo.
Doesn't make sense.
No,
It's
it,
like
it, it
I
doesn't.
like it took years for people to stop bothering me about it, but everyone was so insistent that one, I needed to have children, and two, it was just a matter of time before I realized it.
Yeah, you would
Like
get
I'm some
older
kind of
and you
idiot.
would wake
Yeah,
up
yeah.
and you would just
It's
be like,
just
oh, what was I thinking?
right. And I would obviously change my mind. I even had one guy like,
Yeah,
that's nonsense. Every woman wants children. I was like, that's what you think, huh? You
right.
genuinely believe that? But
Not
yeah,
every
I just
woman
had
that
a lot of
has
people
children
like
wants children. Have y'all seen TikTok?
just had like so many people patronizing me about it. And what's funny to me, there's like so many, no one talks about it, but there's so many pregnant women who end up getting killed by the
Yeah,
baby daddy because he didn't want
that's the
kids.
like
So I'm
number
just like,
one time you're most likely to wind up like being ended in a domestic violence situation is when you're pregnant. Most
right. So
dangerous
it's just
time.
like to even imply that apparently possible for men to not want kids, but for women, that's crazy, and so on
Right.
and so forth. And the same thing with marriage. Like, I don't really want to get
Mm-hmm.
married
No.
because, like, I think it was Whoopi Goldberg who said it. I don't want nobody in my house. Like,
No.
I would just be very unhappy with someone being in my bed every single night. Like, no
Yeah.
thanks. You can never get away from it.
Uh-uh.
Like you never have me time. That's like consider like spousal abuse when you're like, yo, I need you to not be in my room
Well,
right
we'd
now.
have to be
You
married
can't do
like
that.
Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis, right? That man's got a house next door and he lives over there.
Yeah, they call it a broken marriage. And I'm like, yo, I'm not with the shits. And I'm also not with this game that a lot of guys play where they think they can convince you of shit later. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you don't want kids? Yeah, me neither. And then you marry them and it's like,
Yeah.
we're gonna have kids now. And I'm
No,
not
I
dealing with it. That's
actually
annoying.
like the last person that I did sleep with, this guy, after we like, were broken up or whatever, and we're doing that thing that people do where one can be allegedly friends with someone that they dated. He admitted to me one day that he actually was always hoping for an accident or hoping that he could, talk me into being sort of inconsistent enough with, contraceptive practices and then just pressure me into not having an abortion. Like that was like always his plan. And he admitted it casually, like we were just like talking. Like it wasn't even like this was like his like, big like, oh, I had to get this off my heart or whatever, deathbed confession thing. Like he expected me to think that was funny. Like that was what his tone was. Like, man, I'm so wild, right?
It's like, yeah, I'm never talking
Um,
to you again.
that's actually pregnancy coercion. It's a
It's
form of
very
domestic
creepy.
violence. Thank you for confirming for me that I was experiencing that with you. Appreciate it.
And it's like,
And
we
like
were,
40% of people that abuse you in other ways, by the way, engage in pregnancy coercion. Real common.
yeah, of course. Like, it was a big joke. I forget what do they call it? Not ghosting. There's like a whole term
Stealthing.
for it. Yeah, stealthing, where they like remove
Mm-hmm.
it, remove the condom. And I'm just like, this is just a thing y'all do. Like,
Yeah. And like that happened in the movie Knocked Up, but it was supposedly funny.
yeah. Wait, is
Um,
that what happened? I thought they just
yeah,
like, I thought she
he
was just like
like
super drunk. So it was like
no, she was
technically,
super drunk, but like I think he asked her if he could remove it or something at some point and thought she heard him or something. There was something like that. But when they started the encounter, he was wearing one. He took it off at some point and there was some sort of funny misunderstanding about it. But what did not happen was she heard and understood him say that and agreed to it. That's not what happened.
yikes.
Yeah. So yeah, she consented to sex with a condom. She was really drunk. There was a funny misunderstanding in which he took it off. And that's how she wound up
Which
knocked up.
goes to why you probably shouldn't make certain decisions while crazy drunk, right?
Yeah,
And normalizing that was a huge mistake
it
that has led to
was.
nothing good for women ever.
No. I mean, a lot of people don't
Mm.
know that prohibition was very connected to the early feminist movement, and temperance. All of those things were connected. And one of the reasons women wanted the right to vote so bad was they wanted the right to vote to make drinking alcohol illegal because their husbands were getting drunk and beating them up and
Beating
knocking them
them
up and
up.
drinking up all the rent money.
Well, we have to pretend nowadays that when men get super drunk and super high, they never get violent, right?
No,
You've never gone
especially
to a
not
bar
sexually
and
violent.
you never you've never seen you've never gone to a bar and seen like drunk men fighting. That's never happened. Or like a
No,
game or anything.
right.
But apparently
Whether they're winning, losing,
Johnny
whatever.
Depp, when he gets drunk, he's just the nicest guy.
What
That's
he's the same way he is
sure.
normally. He had like three different witnesses testify when
Yeah.
asked specifically if there were any behavioral changes, that there were no significant behavioral changes. So he's
It's
just like he
just
always is.
it's
He
just
does
so
3 lines of
goofy.
coke. He drinks an entire bottle of champagne, and he's just like he is if you ran into him right now. Assuming right now he's not blackout drunk.
We're just all playing make believe, collectively as a
Right.
country right
And like
now.
I had
So
people cite this testimony from people that are on his payroll that when he is drunk or high, he is normal as evidence that his wife is lying. I had people say that to me completely unironically on social media. Girl thing.
yeah.
You know, the whole point of drugs is that it makes you not the way you normally are, right? That's why you take them.
Anywho,
Like
let's not get
altered
too off
states is the
topic.
point. Yeah.
I mean, people just are biased and it just doesn't matter, as
Mm-hmm.
we know. It's a popularity thing. And
Yeah. And the truth of the matter
I'll,
is that people don't care,
no, they
because
don't
if it
care.
was just about whether or not it happened, then all that would need to be presented is evidence that the thing happened. But a lot of people, when confronted with evidence it happened, then just respond with justifications.
And
So
I
it
mean,
sounds
that
like you
goes
don't really care if you
into,
hit her, you care whether you feel like she was enough of an expletive deleted to deserve getting hit by him.
I mean, and that goes into a whole thing where there's a legal term for this that I'm also forgetting, forgive me. Where if you withhold sex from a spouse, that's considered abuse.
Yeah,
And they can hold that against you in a court, like it's a legal issue. So it's
absolutely.
just
It's
like,
also
it's
like
literally,
non-consummation is grounds for annulment as well of the
yes,
whole
exactly,
marriage.
exactly. So it's like, it's literally illegal to say no, technically,
And I mean,
once
it
you're
was
in a
until
marriage.
only 20 minutes ago that it was consistently legal to just rape your spouse. Like, it was considered like if you tried to claim that you had been raped, if it was your spouse, that was considered to be a defense for the man in question, just
Yeah.
that he is your husband, until like what, the late 90s, I believe, in this country.
Because they own you, right?
Yeah. And you know, vowed to, I guess that girl, 'cause otherwise, if that, then that wouldn't make sense as an offense. I feel like I've been to weddings and I haven't heard them say the part that you swear to have sex with him whenever it is that he feels like it until you die, but it must be implicit if they could have held that up in court.
And you know what fascinates me about this whole thing is, you know, I've heard feminists talk about this, right? And
Mhm.
and talk about how sexist, you know, marriage traditionally is. And for that
Mhm.
very reason, in terms of, you know,
Mhm.
your right to say no, your right to this. And then they turn around in the same breath and they're like, asexuality is fake. People are doing, women do
Yeah.
that for attention, so on and so forth. So it's like either
Yeah.
you agree, you can say no, or you don't. It can be both.
Exactly.
What is, I
I've
want
even
someone to
heard it
explain to
referred
me the
to as
problem.
emotional abuse to a spouse to claim to be asexual. I've heard that
It's like you're
before from
doing the
feminists.
same, this is the same thing.
Mhm.
It's the same thing.
I mean, you've
Why is it
basically
hard to
diagnosed
believe?
me with hysteria by reason of frigidity, right?
Like, why is it hard to believe some people just do not enjoy it? Why is that so hard to believe? Like,
Especially since we
I'm
see the
trying to
stats on
understand
satisfaction, especially for like women, like
who fake
something
it.
like only about 30% of women consistently have orgasms during sex. That means 70% don't, y'all.
Right. They're
Um,
just faking through life.
yeah, like the majority of women, like at least occasionally fake it according to stats. And a substantial portion, like well over a quarter, never in their entire lives have orgasms. Well, if you're not trying for a baby, then what else are you gaining from this activity? Serious question, besides not having a whiny man.
You know what's funny? That's what that horrible guy from that stupid alpha podcast Fresh and Fit was saying that
Mm-hmm.
sex is for men and um a woman doesn't need to have one in order to reproduce. So them having one isn't important. And it was like clearly from the mouth of someone who's never accomplished this with a
Exactly.
single woman in his life. Very
No, not
sad.
at all. Because I mean,
And
guys who could actually make that happen tend to find it rather gratifying to have partners that are excited to bother with doing this with them and enjoy it. And I mean, if you like your partner, then you generally want to avoid subjecting them to psychological or physical torture. You know, that's a
like you
thing
don't
people
want to
like each other
force
don't do.
you enjoying something that you know they don't is disturbing. But
Yeah,
that's how these people are. It's just like, oh well, if you love me, don't be asexual anymore. You're a creep. Like, let's
you're a
start
total
there.
creep.
You
And
can
that's just like
simply just
normalization of sexual pathology because you used to qualify for a diagnosis of sadomasochistic disorder if you derived sexual pleasure from the misery of other people.
and why not simply because it's such a small percentage who's either actually asexual or at least willing to admit it that you
Right.
can easily just go outside blindfolded and throw a rock and hit
Yeah.
someone who wants to have sex. Date those
Yeah.
people. Like, why are you trying to convince, you know what I mean? Why are you trying to
Mhm.
coerce and
Yeah.
convince this tiny percentage of the population they need to do something they don't want to do? And why are you
Right.
pissed when we have the nerve to talk about it?
Yeah. And
And
like
then
the
if we
thing
have
with
the audacity to explain how a lot of it comes from, you know, trauma, everyone
that
gets
is like
pissed.
literally what I was about to say. Like a lot of it comes from trauma and it's kind of a cyclical kind of thing because a great way to wind up with sexual trauma is to be consistently disinterested in sex. Say no enough, someone will be mad about it.
That's it's just so crazy to me. It's like, who are you to, and I've seen it like typed out, okay, but basically get over whatever the trauma is because it's not
Yeah.
healthy to continue going on and not having sex and yada yada yada. And it's like, who are you to tell someone
Right.
how to deal with their own trauma, one, and to tell
Right.
them that they have to do this thing and they have to just keep trying and
And
being
like,
re-traumatized until they learn to like it. What the hell? Like,
does anybody
do you
have any
hear
sort of
yourselves?
evidence like that there's any kind of like therapeutic program or methodology that consistently can make people who have lost interest in sex due to sexual trauma start to actively want it themselves and enjoy it and not experience traumatic reactions in the process of it? Because as far as I'm
Yeah,
aware, there isn't.
just like, do you even have a number? Like, do they have a number of how many times you should try before you're like, oh, I should really stop because every time I try, it's
Right.
awful? Like, how many
Yeah,
times should these people re-traumatize themselves trying to fix themselves for y'all? Like,
right. Because
y'all are
like the
sick in the
last
head.
time I
Just date someone who
attempted
wants
having
it.
sex with someone, I had such a bad panic attack. I wound up like physically pushing this person off of me, almost onto the floor, having to run to the bathroom and throw up. I was having in a cold sweat. Like, is
No,
that
you're
how
making
people
it
like to
up.
spend their time?
No, you're doing it for attention. This is fake.
I mean, I hope you're paying attention.
Like,
But
it's so ridiculous. Like, who does this hurt?
right.
Like,
I assure you
I've
that
had
person
people
is
tell
fine.
me, I'm selfish for not wanting to have kids and be with a man and have sex constantly. And I'm just like,
Right.
how is this hurt? Like, who died though? Did you die? Like,
Right.
someone died? You know, anyone dead because I'm just chilling in my room by myself? No, right?
And like, as
Leave,
far as I'm
leave me
aware, every
alone.
person I've ever been with has been with several people before and since me. That I
Like,
have not stopped anybody from being sexually active out here.
it hurts no one.
Like,
No
nobody.
one gets hurt. It's so stupid.
All you do is you don't put yourself in situations that are psychosomatically traumatizing. And the truth of the matter is that, like, if something is triggering for you because you have some kind of trauma about it, like, that's not going to be an enjoyable thing. That's going to be a thing. If you don't absolutely have to do it, then I think it would be reasonable to recommend that you don't do it, especially if you don't enjoy it otherwise. And especially if it's something that comes with risks of its own. Like, do I really want to be on birth control and raising my risk for several different kinds of cancers, strokes, depression, other mental issues, like issues with blood clots, issues with blood pressure? Do I really want to do all of that to myself so that I can more comfortably engage with something I don't want to do?
I
Like,
just
is that like a worthwhile amount of like stuff to put my body through for something I don't want to be doing?
and that's the other thing I've heard people be like, oh, with the whole you're trying to do it for attention thing, right? First of all, they never listen to anyone's to us talk about, like, they never listen to our stories. They have no idea how
Right.
many women end up like this specifically because something awful happened to them. They don't care
Exactly.
about that at all. And then it's
No.
like this whole, oh, you're
Or
lying.
they dismiss it
Why do
based
you,
on that. They
right?
say, oh, well, it's not real. It's not a sexuality because it's like caused by trauma. So it's like not a sexual orientation or something, which
Whatever.
what
It is.
difference does that actually make to the reality that it's something that you don't want to do though?
That's directly related to sex. So
Right. Like, how could that, what, that's just like the people that say, oh, homosexuality isn't real because like a lot of people who are homosexual were like, I don't know, traumatized as kids by adults of the same sex or something like that. Like, okay, even if we play along and we say that was objectively the cause for at least some people to be same-sex attracted as adults, does that make their same-sex attraction not real? If so,
it just doesn't
how?
matter. Who cares about the
Like, it doesn't
cause?
matter.
What it doesn't matter how I got here. It matters that I'm here, right?
Right.
Does
That's the
not matter.
thing that's just
Me
objectively real.
acknowledging that isn't gonna make me go, you know what? Let me go to the bar right now and fuck some string. No, it's not gonna work.
No,
It doesn't matter. Like, it literally doesn't matter.
no.
This like this is so stupid. And like the people who are like, oh, why do they have to go around telling everyone they're asexual? And I'm just like, y'all have a lot of nerves. And I've been hearing this from
We have whole pride parades.
specifically
Like, what do you mean, girl? I thought going around telling people is what we do these days. Isn't
everyone
that how we
else
identify
does.
ourselves? We say, hi, my pronouns are or whatever, and my sexuality is whatever. And that's supposed to be in my bio. What are y'all
But
talking
you know
about?
why it's especially relevant to tell someone what your sexuality is? If you're dating, you kind of want them to know, hey, I date only men, I date only women, I'm
Right.
bisexual, I'm this. I don't have sex at all. Like these are things that are relevant because they affect whoever
Yeah.
you're with, right?
And
So
it's honestly
why
like,
wouldn't we tell people that?
and like it causes so much difficulty and confusion not to tell people that,
Right.
especially as soon as possible, because I have a
It's
before and after
dangerous too.
comparison of what it's like dating. Like before, that was a thing that like I knew about myself and I told
Mhm.
people versus after. And you know, when I do tell people that pretty early, and I'm very clear that that's not a thing that's shifting, shaking, moving, that they shouldn't expect that that's gonna sort of like alter with time or if they behave themselves or whatever, then people who find that to be not okay leave, which is what I want, because I don't want
Exactly.
to be in a situation with somebody who is going to be completely flipping the actual fuck out about it. Um,
And they will get mad. I mean, we see them get mad just talking about it on on social
yeah,
media, just typing it out, how furious it makes them that someone
yeah.
would dare say no.
Like, I'm not even in front of
Um,
you right now. You haven't even bought me dinner and you're already mad. Like, damn.
right. So about that, it's like, no, it's pretty important that you say, by the way, here's a very important thing to know about me. Just like
Yeah,
I always tell when I was dating, I'd always tell guys, I'm like, I'm not trying to get married. I'm not trying to have kids.
yeah,
Just because the kids conversation does come up pretty early. And
yeah.
I'm just like,
I've
just by
honestly
the
never had
way,
sex with someone that I didn't tell that I didn't want kids,
yeah,
because one
just
thing I was told pretty
FYI.
early on, any intercourse between people of the opposite sex has the potential to result in a child. Whether you're on birth control, whether you're using condoms, it's a non-zero risk. It can happen. So I don't think that you should even be in a situation with that kind of risk without, say, having some kind of conversation with somebody. And people say, oh, that's awful, personal talking about that. It's awful personal taking off all your clothes and getting on top of somebody. That's awfully personal.
Apparently not. Apparently saying, because if majority of people are allo, right?
Mm-hmm.
That means most people who I ever go on a date with is going to be expecting sex. So it
Yeah,
just fucking makes sense for me to tell them that's never happening.
right,
Why is that attention seeking? What do you mean? I'm protecting myself from a
right.
potentially angry person who's going to say I
Yeah,
led them on.
right. An angry, confused person. Like, I have had so many sort of traumatizing back and forth before that was a thing that I just let be known with, well, okay, you got real drunk and we did this one time. Why can't we do this again? Well, I mean, you seem to like me. Well, what's wrong? I mean, what's the problem? I mean, why don't you want to have sex with me? I mean, why are you being like this? I mean, what are you punishing me for? I mean, what's the problem? I mean, what? Like, do you have a headache? Oh, you're on your period. What the fuck is going on?
The
I
amount of
don't
times I
know about you, but
like,
that's not my favorite collection of
no,
combos.
no. The amount of times I like traumatize myself trying to be like every other woman I know. It was just a mistake. And at some point, I just realized I'm like, I hate this. I hate this.
Mm-hmm.
And when I just stopped, I, I'm just like, okay, I'm comfortable just not trying to force myself to enjoy something I
Yeah,
clearly don't enjoy. There's just no point in doing that to yourself. To what? For
no,
who? To please someone online who thinks
right.
asexuality is made up? I'm never going to meet this person. Who are you? And why do you
No,
care what I'm doing? You're never going to meet me. It's just
right.
dumb.
It is dumb, and it's harmful to yourself because, like,
It is.
you
It's
know,
self harm. That's what it is.
I could probably, without like needing to like barf in a bucket or something, manage to do that maybe once or twice a month. That's probably about the kind of frequency I could like pull off without like really putting myself through it. I've yet to meet anyone who is real happy there. And to be honest, even that wouldn't be, oh, this is the day that she really wanted to do this thing. It would be, this is how often I can endure this thing without completely losing my mind.
And it shouldn't be like that.
No, that's not recreational at all.
And they'll be pissed because that's not enough for them.
No, it's not. And if they have any sort of vague interest in kind of your feelings or your interest or your responses, then they're also going to be feeling, sensing, seeing the fact that you are attempting to be non-present. And most folks are like not a fan of that. I got complaints about that. Like, hey, hello, are you there? I feel like you're kind of spacing out. I am.
Like,
it's
yeah,
called
I was.
Dissociation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Just doing
thinking
this
about
for
something
you.
else, mostly trying to leave mentally if I can. Like, it's like, oh, I feel like you're not even there. I mean, I'm trying not to be, honey. So, you know, that was like a whole thing. Like, you know, dealt with one guy had like a total, well, at the time, I felt like he had like a complex about her or something. So he was like, you know, hey, like, hey, attention to me here. Like, gotta look at me like, hey, are you there? Like, and it's just like, you're very handsome, darling. But this level of activity here, yeah, not comfortable, don't really want to be doing it. Like, even to the extent that I found any sort of, I guess, psychological or emotional sort of upside to it, it was mostly like the before and after. Like, afterward, you know, we can cuddle and this person isn't mad at me and they're happy, and that's really nice. But like, wouldn't it be nice to not sort of put myself in a situation where I have to sort of endure all of that just so that I could have the peace of you not festering with rage? Like, oh, wasn't it nice to go through a whole day without hearing baby, baby, please, right?
They don't get it. And I think about the sheer amount of women who are having kids they don't want just because it's an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like, this is all the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
that we recognize before we even get in these relationships that it's something we don't want. We don't get trapped into it, and everyone's mad
Right.
that we realize that we genuinely don't want this thing and we refuse to pretend we do. That's what everyone's
No,
pissed about.
yeah,
Which is
I'm not going to
crazy,
pretend I do,
actually.
and I'm not going to just do it anyway. And I'm not going to put myself in situations where realistically that is the outcome. Like, we all know where babies come from. You do the thing that's where babies come from, and then you get pregnant. That's what happens. Like, and, you know, sure, we have all this wonderful technology, but it is not fail safe. And also, it can be directly tampered with if you've got someone who's motivated in such a fashion.
And pregnancy can kill you. Why would I do that? I don't even want kids. Imagine me dying. Imagine me dying in childbirth. Wouldn't that be the dumbest thing I ever did, knowing I don't want children? Can you imagine?
Dude, that made me stop
What
watching
kind of
Lost
L? That's the
Girl. The
biggest L you
character
could take.
Tamsin wasn't even trying to be nobody's mama. She got like raped by some like demon or fae or something, and then wound up dying in childbirth. That's seriously the last episode I watched that show. I was like, how dare you?
Like, we were actually talking about how stupid this was. I'm sure a lot of people have seen the movie The Quiet Place and have seen the show The Walking Dead. Getting pregnant during the apocalypse, knowing there's monsters specifically attracted to sound that will kill you and your whole family, is just the dumbest thing.
Yeah,
it's just
terrible,
the dumbest
no
thing.
good, very bad idea.
And like I was saying that to like, I was talking about The Quiet Place in particular, and like the scene where the little boy died, and I'm just like, yeah, this is what happens. Like,
Yeah,
when it's impossible, pretty impossible to always have your eye on your small children, right?
Absolutely.
And then it's even more impossible to make your kids be completely silent, right?
Right.
Like, holy shit.
My childhood
So,
was called The Adventures of My Mother Trying to Do
oh,
That.
oh my, like, imagine how impossible that's an impossible situation. So to then get pregnant, to have an infant, and then they had to come
Right.
up with all these like fucking Inspector Gadget type things to try and figure out, oh my God, how are we going to do the childbirth? Because you're obviously going to be screaming, then the baby's
Right.
going to be screaming, and the
Right.
freaking alien monsters are going to find us and murder us, right?
Right.
So and quick, like they come immediately, Angelique. Like you haven't seen the movie. It's like within seconds of making sound, they are there.
Oh
That's how
crap.
quick. Yeah. So it's not like with the zombies where it's like, oh, you make noise, they're gonna be here in a few hours. No, 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 no. Those aliens are there in seconds. So it's like for you to
Oh,
be
see, I'd be
like,
super dad, girl.
for you to be like, you know what? I understand the danger of us having sex is we will probably get pregnant because we don't have contraception and have a baby, go through the childbirth, which is also very loud, and this will probably get all of us killed. And you're just like,
Yeah.
sex, living, sex.
But
You know,
men
that's
have
stupid.
needs, right? They
That's crazier than
need to
me just
do
saying
this.
that's, no, that's more normal than me saying don't, because I was just like when my sister was like, yeah, I mean they had to have sex and there's no contraception. I was like, so you
It's
don't
like,
have
define have
sex.
to.
I was like, then just don't, because if if it's gonna get you killed, you and your whole family, don't do it. But
Right.
apparently this need outweighs everything.
I mean, we pretend it does all the time. It's so
So okay.
goofy. It's like, it's the dumbest thing. And, you know, I feel like pretending that it's this sort of like overwhelming need when more objectively it's just a strong desire that is not like necessary for continued like survival as an individual at all. It's just how they justify a lot of sexual violence. Like I think that's like the
Absolutely.
main sort of reason for acting like that is a thing that like makes sense.
He couldn't help himself. He was teased. He had blue balls, yada yada, so
Right.
on and so
He,
forth.
you know, a man has needs, and that's how we justify the whole sex industry, right? Because people need things. And what if you're a man and you need sex and no woman will agree to have sex with you? I mean, that sounds like a great reason for you to not have sex, unless you live in a patriarchy, right?
And unfortunately, I've seen women doing the same,
Oh yeah.
saying this, yeah, with the same
Singing the same song.
horrible talk about how, women claiming to be asexual are liars and so on and so forth. And sex is such a need and pro sex work and pro this and pro that and liberation, freedom, nonsense.
Oh,
Yeah.
and don't forget, if you were to just go into YouTube and or any social media and just like type in asexual or asexuality, probably the first thing you would come up with is why asexuals can have sex too. Top myth about asexuality: asexuals don't have sex. Like how you can have sex as an asexual, how to negotiate like sex with an allosexual partner as an asexual. Weird how all the stuff about asexual is about having sex if you don't want it, but okay. Is anyone going to make any content about like not having sex if you don't want to have sex? Is that an option we have? If I don't want to, can I just like not do that?
No, you can't just say no.
Well, I mean, you can say no sometimes, but you got to negotiate, got to compromise. You can't just say no all the time, even if you don't want to all the time.
Or I guess I should correct myself. You can't say no to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, so modern feminists believe you have the right to say no, but you can't just never
Right.
have sex. That's
Look,
not
you could say
allowed.
no to maybe this particular individual in this particular time, but not all of them.
I really would love one of them to explain the problem, like why it makes them so angry. um,
Right.
I've seen like the craziest rants about it from feminists on
Yeah.
Tumblr and stuff, and I'm just like, what are you mad about?
Right. Like,
Like, explain how this affects you in any way.
I'm just like, I would assume all these people were incels, but I didn't know some of them actually had humans that have sex with them. So that makes that even weirder for me. At least I understand where the incels are coming from, honey. Like, but like you're fine. You've got, hopefully whoever you're having sex with is doing so consensually because they want to. So like, are you not good? So like, why are you bothering other people? Um, it's miserable and weird, and I feel like the level of like sort of like anger and disbelief around it just really goes back to like the history of pathologizing women's lack of desire. Like, and we talked to a bit, both of our channels, about like the diagnosis of different sort of personality disorders for women, like borderline and histrionic personality disorder, which both go back to hysteria. And one common symptom of hysteria that's fully got women thrown in asylums is, as they used to call it, frigidity, lack of interest in sex. And weird how for something that's supposedly fake, there's been a name for it for like centuries, but okay, right? Like I've seen a lot of people sort of act like, asexuality falls in the category of sort of new made up identities or something like that, when there's recorded evidence of people, particularly women with sexual trauma, being persistently, consistently over long periods of life, including over their lifetimes, not interested in sex. Goes back a real long time. There's nothing recent about that. So usually that's enough to satisfactorily prove to scientific standards a phenomenon is real, but I guess for this it isn't.
And also like one thing I've thought about, there's like a lot of popular characters who I'm pretty sure are on the ace spec somehow. Like
Yes.
the doctor from Doctor Who's one.
Mm-hmm.
Um Dang, there was another one I was thinking of. Jughead, Riverdale was
Yeah.
supposed to be one. They changed that into live action
Yeah, but
for
he is in the
reasons.
comics and things.
Um,
From the anime Devil is a Part-Timer, the protagonist there,
mhm.
no, none of that kind of interest displayed ever at any point towards anyone.
I know this one will piss a lot of people off, but I think Bucky Barnes is on the A spec somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, he's at least like I don't think he wants to be there, if that makes sense.
Right, and a
But he
lot of
has a lot to
people
work
don't.
through. And there's a difference. There's some people who are just like, oh, I'm fine with it. And then there's some people who are like, I want to get back
Yeah,
that feeling I used to
right,
have.
right,
And then there are some people who never had that feeling. You know what I mean? Who never
right.
enjoyed it. So it's like
Yeah.
there's
And like I
nuance,
know
you
that I
know?
fall in that
There's
category because I actually have kept diaries off and on since I was in high school. So I could actually read my own thoughts for a comparison and say pretty objectively before I was assaulted how I felt about sex. And I wasn't interested. Like that's like I know that, it can be sort of hard to know because you can feel like you've always felt a way, like that's just kind of how feelings are. You can't necessarily, it can be hard to tell if you've changed or something. But I've literally written it down. I've got documentary evidence. It's adequate for me. I know I've just never been interested really.
yeah.
Um,
Like for me, I never wanted kids, but I used to want to get married. And I think I kind of used to enjoy it. Actually, no. No, I didn't. But I used to want to get married. That changed when I realized there's a lot of expectations that come with marriage, and
yeah,
it's impossible to just find someone who's interested in basically being your bestie who likes
right,
to cuddle with you in bed and just
right.
chill with you all day. This doesn't exist.
No, or at best, that's probably a friend that isn't sexually interested. Like,
Yeah.
like I do have some male friends that are totally down to just cuddle whatever, and there's never any drama. And you know who they have sex with for fun? Men. So, so my personal experience, the only guys that are really comfortable with a significant amount of non-sexual intimacy without getting weird on you about it is ones that are just not attracted to you in that way. But like, that is something that's, also like people find in like same-sex friendships and things like that, because obviously most people are straight, that kind of thing. But besides, like, I think there's a higher possibility of being able to sort of have a significant amount of non-sexual intimacy without things getting weird or problematic if both parties are just not sexually interested in each other. But I think if you're dealing with someone who's sexually attracted to you, then getting past a certain level of sort of, a certain amount of, I guess, close exposure just gets torturous and weird for them. And it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Like it's going to stress them out.
See, and then
they're going to stress you out.
Exactly. It's just a lose-lose, honestly.
Yeah,
so I just went on Tumblr and I typed in anti-asexual just to see what I could find.
And what was in the seventh circle of hell?
One of these posts says, ace and arrow people are not oppressed and have never been oppressed. Just because someone one day was like, why don't you fuck me? And then you went home and cried about it, doesn't mean you faced oppression. It's so ignorant to compare your struggles to that of LGBT people. And it's nearly as tone deaf as saying all lives matter.
So nothing bad has ever happened to a woman for saying no to sex?
No, that never happened.
Nothing.
No.
Nice to know. Nice to know. I guess we're just the two most unlucky women in the world, aren't we? Yeah. We're just the only ones that had something bad happen when we said no.
Maybe we just always run into the only rapist on the planet. That's crazy.
We must know the only two. Maybe it was the same guy. We got to compare notes.
Maybe it was the same guy.
It can't be a thing that there's like multiple people doing that happens to people all the time. It certainly can't be a thing that happens to 1 in 6 women, right? That like you say no and they do it anyway. That
imagine thinking that's the extent of the issues, that someone was like, why don't you fuck me? And I was like, no. Then I went home and cried that someone said the word fuck to me or something. Imagine being this ignorant and really thinking that's the problem and not the fact people are trying to pressure you and
they're certainly not going to from that point try to pressure you or coerce you or force you or anything. That doesn't
or
happen
lie to you
people.
and say it's okay, and then you're alone with them and then they try attacking you or all of these things. It is like it is oppression to be told you have to do something you don't want to do by everyone.
Yeah,
women and men, everyone.
And it's even like, even people that are not specifically trying to engage with this with you can engage in this kind of like weird pressuring behavior around it. Like, a now former like male friend of mine who is, far as I'm aware, into dudes would several times we wound up having these weird sort of debates or arguments or conversations about just how unreasonable it is that I don't have sex with anyone.
And then this other one just says, these people are so crazy. It's like, I don't know how you get so deluded that you just forget everything that has ever happened in history to women, because that's what you have to be doing to say these type of things. This other person says,
well, you have to imagine that women have been given the autonomy to say no, have it respected, and go about their business. And like, where's that world? We don't live in it.
Like, I think it's in 30 something states, it's still legal for police officers to rape prostitutes today in 2022.
And in several states, it's still legal to rape, for guards to rape prisoners in jails, even though you are in prison. So the rest of the states at least consider it to be rape whenever you as a prison guard have sex with a prisoner, because they can't consent as you have them imprisoned, there's several states where it's still, you can say that it's sex with
And
someone that you're the guard for.
we already went over how marriage was, right? Where it was husbands could just rape their wives. How is this not common knowledge what marriage was like by now? Am I
Right.
crazy? I thought everyone friggin' knew this at this point.
Well,
Okay,
I mean, nowadays feminist education has taken
you're right. You're right.
more of a focus on sort of gender and queer studies and less on what has happened to women born women. So a lot of that history isn't getting taught because it's more on theory of sexuality in education with regards to what used to be feminist studies now.
Or history of women at all.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate because now you have people saying dumb shit all over the place and they genuinely think they're making sense. And this person says, saying asexuals are part of the LGBT community is so stupid because one, it's never been illegal to not have sex, whereas being homosexual and transsexual has been and still is in many places. Your asexuality is a private issue confined to your own bedroom. No one can ever tell you're asexual, whereas gay stereotypes are rampant and people can tell you're gay if you're a man and you start holding your boyfriend's hand in public. Three, no one has ever been denied rights, um, i.e., the right to marry for being asexual. No one is ever disrespected or discriminated against for being asexual. The only reason y'all get hate is because you won't stop trying to force your way into our community just because you don't want to fuck. And four, being pressured into sex is not an issue primarily faced by asexual. It's asexual. It's an issue faced by everyone. It's called rape.
Well, I mean, I have a problem with every single point there. First of all, didn't we just say that you didn't have the right to marry as an asexual because non-consummation is considered grounds for annulment? So therefore, you were not considered to be married unless you had sex. So of course, you don't have the right to be married if in the event that you were to go through the motions of it, you'd be considered not married to someone. So that
They don't know
weird point.
anything about history. People do not Google things and they don't
Yeah.
read books and they just don't care about learning things
Well, I mean,
anymore.
a lot of this stuff is things that primarily impact, garden variety, regular, degular, supposedly not oppressed cisgender women, right? And we can't be like centering those sorts of experiences because we're a more enlightened society than that. So I guess we can't really get into this stuff, right?
And for the second point, asexuality isn't a private issue because everyone you meet and try to date, once you have sex, it's not a private issue. It's
Yeah.
their issue too, because then you have to tell them, I can't, here's why. And I never can. It's not
Right.
just between you and yourself.
And I mean, you only imagine that this isn't something that's going to have a significant lasting impact on your life if you simply don't believe people when they say that they're not going to change their minds, right? Because like these sorts of things would make sense if you're talking about just saying no sometimes, right? If you're talking about something that's like temporary, like not being in the mood or something like that, then all of this would apply. If you're talking about something that is persistent, lasting, and consistent, then you've got a very different situation.
And you know what I hate? It's like because we recently are able to define things a lot more and come up with terms for them, there was a lot of women in the past who didn't want to get married, who didn't want to have kids, whatnot, and they'd call them, witches or shrews or what have you,
Spinsters, yeah.
spinsters, all of that stuff, right? And so these people have always existed. They were
Mm-hmm.
just, outcasted and looked down on, some were murdered for it, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for the third point that no one has ever been denied rights
A lot of them
for
wound up in
being
asylums and nunneries.
asexual. No. These people, some of them been burned at the stake. Women
Mm-hmm.
who didn't have husbands weren't able to do damn near anything. Buy property, have a
Right.
job,
vote,
How are they
have
not
a
denied
bank
rights? What are
account.
you talking about?
Right.
What are you talking about?
Well, they're pretending that that historically you could be married without having sex,
And so
even
because
though
there
that's
wasn't a term
objectively
for it,
untrue.
that means it didn't, that's not what was happening.
And like there was a term for it. It's just a highly stigmatizing term, right?
Right.
Like
I
you just
mean,
said,
you know what I mean.
witch, spinster, frigid, hysteric. There are plenty of terms.
Right.
And it was well understood that what we were talking about when these sorts of terms were used. And I don't really dropped earphone. I don't really understand why it is that people that are identify themselves with feminism and present as if they have some sort of understanding of women's history and their oppression and how our biology and our sexuality impact our oppression, wind up saying such dumb stuff all over the place.
So dumb. And especially this last point about how being pressured into sex is not an issue primarily faced by asexual, it's an issue faced by everyone. It's called rape. Never have we ever said this only happens to us.
Right.
Let's start
No,
there.
no
Who
one
said
ever
that?
says that.
Who said we have ownership over this issue?
Right.
No one in the world.
And also this
But
person's never heard of math, because the more often you say no, the higher your chances are of having something bad happen when you say no. You say it all the time. Look at them numbers, like basic probability. So yeah, no, we're not the only ones who face that, but we do objectively face issues with it more often than other people. Why wouldn't we?
Because we never want it. Do you like right. This is not hard to understand.
Like the idea that people who say no all the time wouldn't have more issues with no's is like, you've never heard of math.
The other part they're missing is that a lot of us feel like there's something wrong with us being like this. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's not even the other person. It's us forcing ourselves to try and be allo. And then afterwards, we feel like we were just raped and we're traumatized again. That's the difference, is that it's never like you feel like you can convince yourself to like it, and then you still feel like shit after. It's just not.
You're like, well, I like
good.
this person. I want this person to be happy. This is a beautiful person, a kind person, a person I want to please, a person who wants to please me. They like me. I like them. Like you said, you tell yourself these things. You say, this is a situation I want to be in. I want to put myself in. This is a thing I want to do. And your body's like, no, girl, no, it's not.
And I mean, here's some definitions of sexuality. This one says human sexuality is the way people experience and express themselves sexually. How does saying you don't want to have sex with other people ever not considered a type of sexuality?
Right. I mean, if that is
Explain it.
And like, we usually, if we want to decide whether to find something as like a sexual orientation or not, one of the main factors is it be something persistent, something lasting, something that cannot be consciously changed. I don't see how this doesn't fit the bill.
I tried to do what do they call it? Well, they try to convert gay people back.
Conversion therapy.
Right. I tried my own personal conversion therapy by having sex with a bunch of people and feeling like I was raped.
Miserable and gross and like removing all your skin.
Guess like what? That? It can't be changed. Something happened to me that forever changed how I feel about it. And that's the end of it. There's just nothing. I don't have a time machine, you understand? And I don't get why this is such a problem to accept that sometimes people just there's a group of people who do not like this thing. It makes them feel terrible, and it just is what it is. Every time, there's no circumstance where that can be fixed.
No. And the thing is, people pretend as if there is, because most of the time when people bring up the whole like, oh, it's often caused by trauma thing, that carries the implication that therefore, they'll say like, oh, these people should go to therapy. I don't know if you guys know what happens in
Absolutely.
there, but it's not sorcery. Like there isn't
No.
any program of therapy that has shown any kind of like consistent results for making a person who doesn't want to have sex. It's just not a thing.
Honestly,
Um,
I just need them to understand that the difference is that
and
you sometimes do enjoy sex. So when you have sex, it's not always considered rape because you sometimes you make the choice to have it and you enjoy it and you want it.
right.
So for the women who are doing it for someone else and never like it, that's not the same.
No, it's not.
For
And
the married women having sex with their husbands that they don't want to have, but they're just doing it because they feel like they have to, this is not the same.
that's torturing yourself. And everything that I understand about sexual trauma says that physiologically and psychologically, you react to the same way to forcing yourself in a situation like that that you do to just being straight out raped. It's why prostitutes have such high rates of PTSD, even though they are choosing to engage in this activity and there's, exchange of funds. But even though they're making the conscious and therefore like willing choice in many cases to engage in this activity, because they do not desire to be having this sex with this person, their brain is like, this is sexually traumatic. Like your
Mm.
brain doesn't really care about your BS explanations you give out loud. What it's doing is it's saying, okay, whatever happens when you are wanting to have sex, is that happening? And if the answer is no, then it's going, oh, so it's rape time. That's what happens in there. Um, and if you'd like to go to Rape Town, I wouldn't recommend it.
Just
And
like there's and
you
like
know,
there's so many, I don't get why it's just bizarre to me that people think there's that some sexualities are valid and some aren't. Like, so there's
right,
people who are demisexual who only want to have sex with someone they're in love with. And if they have casual sex, they feel like shit after, they hate it. That's valid. You don't have to
right.
explain that to anyone.
And like,
That's
I
okay.
really
What
don't
is the
see,
problem?
I don't like, I've heard explanations for why it's supposedly problematic to have all these like micro labels and like words for different kinds of sexuality, but nobody's ever actually explained why having a word to describe a phenomenon is bad in some way because it's sexual.
Why can't you define it? Maybe I don't want to call myself a shrew. You ever thought about that? I don't mind calling myself a witch. I'll do that. But I mean,
I mean, I prefer the term frigid bitch personally.
by all means, call me a sorceress. I will take that term.
And I have
But
actually been accused of witchcraft by a former, we'll call him a lover for the purpose of this conversation. Yeah, slept with this guy, didn't feel inclined to do it again because I don't feel inclined to do it at all. And he developed a sufficient obsession with me that he was sure what had caused it was I had done something of a magical nature to cause him a psychological obsession. And he outright accused me of witchcraft.
there you have it.
So
Okay, so all in
apparently in
favor,
the
since there's
21st
this,
century, you can still be accused of witchcraft for asexuality. It happened to me.
all in favor of changing asexuality officially to sorcery, say aye.
I,
It's
oh
just,
God, when you put it, God, when I put it that way, I'm really falling out. Like, and people say that it's such a like ridiculous and sort of outrageous thing that women have been thrown in asylums and all of these kinds of things about it. And it's like, I don't know. Have you tried telling Twitter? uh, like now imagine if the Twitter trolls that threaten to rape you to death had the ability to have you involuntarily committed. Do you think one of them would do it? Do you think any of them would be willing to do it? I think so.
I'm so blessed. These activists, online activists aren't in charge of jack shit because they're crazy. They're crazy people who think they should apparently have say over someone else's body, and you shouldn't be able to talk about your experiences. And it's like, first of all, I don't even go around advertising that I'm asexual because
Right, me either.
I don't know anyone who really does. You know what I mean? Some people are
No,
like, oh, I'm in the LGBTQ plus community, and that's their right. But I personally don't like using sexuality as a personality trait. So you're never going to
right,
see that
like,
in my profile. I think that's weird.
no,
And I think people who do it are
no,
weirdos,
I
personally.
agree.
Like, this is a
The
weird
only
thing to
way
do.
that
No one
comes up is
asked.
if I'm wanting to engage online a specific discussion about it, then, or if it
Absolutely.
comes up in conversation or something. But if it doesn't organically come up in conversation, or I'm not intentionally engaging in a discussion about it, I don't bring that forward as just part of the general process of introducing yourself. Like, hi, I'm
Personally,
Michelle
me.
Chaton, and I'm
Why would I do that? That's weird.
right.
It's between me
And
and whoever I'm with, right?
right. And I mean, you could choose anything about yourself if you were to give an elevator speech about who you are. And I don't understand why people would choose their sexuality. Like if I were to give an elevator speech about like who I am, like, all right, you got to sit and introduce yourself. I might say I'm an artist. I might say I'm an aspiring author. I might say that I'm prettier than you, but I probably wouldn't go with my sexuality.
I mean, it's the same way, I watch people and I think these can be very valid points where it's like when a lot of gay people talk about how they feel like most media presents, straight couples. I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
That media does tend to present straight
Although
couples most of the
90% of
time.
people are opposite sex attracted, so that's also reasonably expected.
You stay with me. I'm not. I'm saying they are correct that most
Yeah,
media does
yeah. I
indeed
mean, that is a correct
present. Right.
observation, although it
So
shouldn't be a surprising one.
here's what I'm getting at. The way that they can say it bothers them to see that
Yeah.
many straight people on TV, and straight people can in turn say, oh, social justice warrior bullshit, there's too many gay people on TV now, too many women, yada yada yada,
SJW,
right?
gay agenda,
Right, the gay agenda.
propaganda
Right.
machine of
So
Satan.
these two people can say that. Imagine if, and we don't even do this, right? That's what's funny.
Right.
We don't bother anyone. Imagine if we were like, every single piece of media I see, people who are in love have sex, and that's not representative of the. We don't give a shit. We legit don't bother people for
We
being
just be
different than
letting
us.
people
We
like
just want to
get
let
how they
people
live.
know that it's perfectly fine that like 95% of you are this way, 5% of us aren't.
Yeah.
And if you ask us, if you date us, we'll probably just warn you because
Yeah.
we don't want to trick anyone. That's it.
We don't want
That's
no
it.
confusion. We don't
That
want no
is it.
smoke. We
I
won't
don't want
start
any
none. There
smoke.
won't
I
be
don't want to
none.
be attacked by a man again.
No.
Because of leading so and all someone on, and
Yeah.
I don't want to do that anymore. We
Yeah.
don't want to be in
Flirting,
those
teasing, leading on. Ooh,
situationships.
let's not get accused of any of that. No,
Yeah,
thank you, girl.
like you have to tell them in the sense that like a trans woman I've had conversations with was saying that she tells people who she's going to date that she's trans so she can avoid dangerous situations. It
Yeah.
makes
It's pragmatic.
sense to protect yourself in that
And
way
like when it
because
comes to
bitches be
disclosure and
crazy.
sexuality, people have people have feelings about wanting to be involved with people of certain sexualities. Like some people don't want to date bi people, particularly not, bi men for different kinds of reasons. Like it's fairly common to hear from like lesbians not wanting to date bisexual women.
Right.
Some people don't want to date people that are trans. Some trans people identify as T for T. They don't want to date people who are cis.
All of this is valid. Like you don't have to.
And if you know that that's something that might matter to someone, then it seems like it's responsible on your part if you think that this might influence their decision to consent or not consent to disclose this information. Because I do feel like it's rape by deception, if you believe that some kind of information would influence whether a person would want to be involved with you or not, and you intentionally omit that information.
And if it's valid to not date people you don't want to date, it's valid to not have sex with people you don't want to have sex with. And I feel like
Right.
this is obvious and simple, and it's very weird that
Mm-hmm.
people are acting like it's not. Just like the person who wrote one of those Tumblr posts that I wrote said they're some kind of sexuality, pansexual, something like that, whatever. Just like you are
As
disclosing this
I, my whole
information.
face like scrunches up because
As,
Lord, the
no, as you
discourse on
tell it,
bi versus pansexuality.
as you say, it's a our being asexual is a private issue and we should keep it to ourselves. You literally list first thing on your profile, here's my sexuality. Ironic, but also just the same way that when they're dating someone, they would probably tell them that. We
Mm-hmm.
tell you if we don't ever want to have sex, right?
Right.
Is that not valid? Like, why would I lie about that and then get my ass beat later?
Right.
What is
And
the
like I want to
point?
give you the choice to
Or
decide
piss
whether
somebody
that's
off doing
something
this
that
shit?
like you're comfortable with or not, whether you can deal with or not. Or potentially you might even be able to negotiate something, like some people who are asexual have open relationships and things like that, so that their partners have the option to sleep with other people. Like
Same way,
you
like
might be able to figure something out without compromising yourself by having to deal with unwanted sexual situations.
same thing with like, the point of, going on dates is to learn about each other, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
sexuality matters, religion matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I say politics matters, especially
Yeah. I
today.
mean, this day and age, yeah.
Um,
And
so
like,
it's like I
people,
wouldn't want to
and
date
even
a
people have,
Christian
I had someone
because
actually lie to me about that. I had someone lie and say that they were not Christian. And then naturally they felt guilt about this because, girl, they were religious. And then they admitted that, like, they were. And they're like, that's okay with you, is it? And I was like, no, it's actually not. And he's like, you would discriminate against me because I'm Christian? And I said, no, I do not date Christian people, which includes you, because we don't have shared values. So
yeah, you're supposed to be equally yoked. Isn't that their whole thing
yeah,
anyway?
it says that in your
I
whole
don't
book,
wanna
dog.
I don't want to be forced into a religion, and I don't want to force someone who really believes in God, who really like is deeply involved in religion, to stop believing.
Right. I'm
Seems
really uncomfortable
unnecessary.
with people
This is my
with
issue, right?
evangelical atheists who feel this like need to try to sort of convince and convert people
Mhm.
and stuff. Hate that.
I
Don't like it. It's
that's why,
disrespectful.
that's why I never tell people I'm an atheist, because I'm like, atheists are like so annoying. They do
Yeah.
this thing where it's like, I'm smarter than everyone, and if you're religious you're stupid, and I don't need to do that.
Oh, Sky Daddy, Spaghetti Monster.
Science, yeah, like I don't need to do any of that shit, right? This is
Right.
unnecessary. Like, believe what helps you get through life.
Right.
I'm happier where I'm at, and yeah.
And and I mean, I think some people like objectively do get something positive, like emotionally and
Oh yeah.
psychologically out of their belief. So I think it's kind of crappy to try to force someone out of that just because you have a different belief system. Like, leave people alone.
And it's like, okay, it's valid that, there's been no atheist wars. There's only been religious
Well,
wars. That's
unless you count the
true.
communist girl, because last I checked, what was Stalin killing people for? How many millions? It depends on how you
Yeah.
argue it.
But yeah, it's just like, even
Oh,
so,
and communist China, how many people, how many religious people died over there?
it's just like you have to understand that
Of course,
you
they say
know,
there's never been any atheist wars, but I feel like that's a kind of self-serving position because there have definitely been some atheist dictators that have mass murdered religious people. That's happened.
yeah, I just feel like it's not fair to evil people are going to be evil no matter
Yeah,
what. And if they have the power and they feel like killing people, they're going to do it. They're going to
absolutely.
use religion as a scapegoat. They'll use politics. They'll use
Hmm.
sexuality.
Yeah,
They'll use
economics, all
race.
kinds of
It doesn't matter.
things.
They'll find a reason to be evil because they suck. So
Yeah,
holding it against like small group of people who are religious, who has legitimately helped them get through life, that there are, a much bigger thing than them of people who use religion to brainwash people, to harm
Right.
people. That's not on them. Like, my
No,
sister's
it's not.
religious. It's not her fault that there's some Christians running around using
Like,
Christianity to
if my
brainwash
grandma was
people
the
and be
president,
harmful.
I promise you, we would not live in an evil theocracy. I know her. She's nice. Like, she would not use that as an excuse to mass execute people. Everybody don't
Yeah.
have that character just because they have some kind of faith, you know?
And if I was asexual, I wouldn't go around chopping everyone's dick off. I promise.
No, even though the movie Hard
I
Candy made a
promise.
very good case for that. And of all the different treatments for serial sex offenders, the most consistently effective one has been physical castration. But like, I'm a nice girl, so I'm not going to recommend that policy.
Way to end the video. See, like as we told you, asexuals don't hurt anyone. We just want to chop your shit off. No.
I mean, you
Imagine if
can
that
keep
was
it,
really
or orgasmy
imagine
can
if
do the
that was
job.
really the argument in this video. Everyone should just
Does anyone
be
need it?
sterilized, Just...
Chemical castration, have a little Lupron, get on with your day. It'd be fine.
This is exactly why I got blacklisted on YouTube. This is why.
I mean,
brought it on myself, really.
Don't worry, it's not our main topic. We made it for the first 10 minutes the censors really listened to. We'll be fine.
Yeah.
And we're like obviously kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully you guys can tell, but I don't know. Maybe the whole world's made of Megan Fox anti-fan.
Or Megan.
I actually had someone on social media say to me very seriously that this identity thing has gotten out of hand now that Megan Fox is identifying as a vampire American. I'm pretty confident she's not seriously. I can't with y'all. And see, if I was her, I would have the exact same trouble, because there's no way if somebody with a straight face asked me that question in an interview, I would say anything other than I absolutely am, and I'm an advocate for vampire rights. There's no way I could give a serious answer.
As a sorceress at this point, and I kind of think I should. I think I should just put my sexuality as sorceress in all of my social profiles. Why not?
Like, I honestly see interviews that celebrities, particularly women, have where they ask them these insane questions, and all I can think is I would just always be in the news, because you would have to win a stupid prize for playing these stupid games with me. I can't resist. It's a compulsion. There's no way.
I'd be in the news for telling people to go fuck themselves constantly. Like, oh my God. So,
like, if somebody were to ask me, like, what kind of bra did you wear under your superhero costume? Then I would be like, well, actually, I just lift my tits with superpowers. I'm a superhero in the movies. I don't know what you're asking me. Like, it would just be an endless stream of stupid answers.
I'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Actually, don't bleep it out. You sat down, you watched the movie, and this is the question you came up with. I just be cussing people out. Like, what is wrong with you?
I had to be pulling around the kettlebells and stuff. They hooked me up to a harness. I'm flying through the sea. I'm gonna swing from the chandelier. And you asked me about my titties, though.
No.
Like,
oh, man.
There's no way. And honestly, the one thing that no one really says about asexuality, if we're gonna make an asexual positive point, is that it is awesome to have a life that's completely absent all of the concerns that come with having people penis you as a hobby. Like, it's actually really great. Like, you know what happens every month when I'm waiting for my period? It happens. And you know what I'm thinking about when, like, I'm scheduling my week and I'm getting in my bullet journal? You know what I'm just never having to do? Be like, oh my God, am I late? If I'm late, do I need to run get a pregnancy test? Oh my God, if I'm pregnant, are we going to have it? Are we going to get an abortion? Am I going to tell him? Is he going to be like one of my ex-boyfriends and like strangle me or like rape me or something if I tell him I'm getting an abortion? Like, what's gonna happen? That like never happened to me, which is like really cool.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm trying to, you know, figure out like, am I going crazy or does my body just not like birth control? When I'm, you know, like I was briefly on it for like an unrelated sort of like, you know, physiological lady parts issue. And over the course of like 4 months, I put on like 70 pounds. That's gone, not coming back, and I don't have to worry about that. That's real cool. I'm like really into that, not having that problem. What problems do you like not have as a lady that doesn't have sex?
Oh boy.
Like, oh, and also we don't have to get into arguments with guys like ever about what kind of frequency with which we're engaging in sex we're not interested in. That's kind of fun, isn't it? You know, like there's a lot of problems that I just don't have that other women have. Like I watch sitcoms and stuff, and isn't it wild sometimes when you watch these things and you think, wow, I don't like relate to this issue at all, like because I just like don't have this problem. Isn't that kind of cool?
No, no, not an issue for me. Um,
Like
I'm glad I haven't lived my life, worried about trying to get married before a certain age because my clock is ticking on
yeah,
when I can have kids. It's not an issue for me. It's very freeing.
right.
Um,
You're
not
not
giving a
like,
shit about
wow, we're
that.
in our 30s now. Like, we got to be careful. Like, we don't want to be having geriatric pregnancies and dealing with like high risks and dying on tables. That's kind of cool. Not
Yeah.
have to worry about, especially being Black women in America. Real high rates of those sorts of problems for us if we engage with that. And like, I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for women who are going through this. I speak out about these issues. I care about these issues. It's not a matter of like me being unconcerned with them. I just feel a real sense of personal peace with not having to individually contend with them. And I feel like nobody talks about that or presents that there can be some kind of an upside to like living your life in a way that you don't have certain problems. Like everyone always
Hmm.
acts like it's such a like downside to like it's such a sort of like negative thing. Like, you know, we talked about conversion therapy earlier, which is basically what they're asking us to do
Yeah.
when they say, oh, you know, if you've had some kind of like sexual trauma and you think that you're asexual, you should like see a therapist. Well, I'm assuming what you're hoping that that person is going to be able to do is that person is going to be able to change the nature of my sexual desires and produce ones that previously didn't exist. And you're hoping that person is going to be able to do something that is going to overcome my instinctive physiological disgust and aversion. That's what you're wanting them to do, right? Which isn't the inability with any kind of known therapeutic practices to get rid of like disgust or aversion reactions to unwanted sexual situations the literal stated reason that the anti-gay conversion therapy doesn't work? Like, not that it's unethical, but like the reason it doesn't work. Because I feel like those are two totally different conversations. Like, does it work versus if it works, is it ethical to do? And what we've determined, a lot of research going back very far has determined, isn't just that like, you know, being gay is okay. So based on that, you don't need conversion therapy. Sure, but that's like an opinion. What actual science has determined, like mental health science, is that it does not work, as in it is not possible to take people, put them in situations that they don't want sexually, and via some therapeutic process, cause them to not feel like disgust and trauma. So why would that work on us if it doesn't work on them, right? Like, why would anyone think that works? They
They
suggest we
assume,
go to therapy, like there's some evidence that there's a thing they do in therapy that works for that. Why do they say that?
I think a lot of it is they're assuming we're faking because there's just no way someone couldn't just not enjoy sex. Like it's impossible. And you'll get a lot of, you just haven't met the right partner yet, which is a lot
Yeah.
like what creepy men be saying to lesbians. Yeah. But
Yeah.
let's keep doing this. Makes sense.
Oh, I've had a lot of people suggest to me that I might be like a lesbian and not know it. Fun fact, I have dated and had sex with women. Not any more interested in that than having sex with men. Sorry, everybody.
They don't care. That's
Nobody
the
cares what
problem.
I want.
No, you don't get to say no forever. You can
No,
only say no conditionally. That's
exactly.
what I'm getting out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently it makes sense to them. You know what? If you don't want asexuals to say they're part of the LGBTQ plus community, fine. I guess we can create some third lane,
Right,
but
sure. We're just the A
we
community then,
definitely
okay.
don't fit into traditional sexuality. We just don't.
No.
And it's
Because
that
I mean, we're
simple.
literally like just physically incapable of engaging in traditional sexual romantic relationships.
Yeah.
Like
So
we like, you know, if you're not a romantic, you might have the capacity to, you know, be romantically interested in someone, even if you're not sexually interested. Like I, you know, I have fallen in love with people, been romantically interested in people, had crushes on people, have dated people. I just haven't managed to have sex with anyone.
and they need to like, I mean, I wish people would understand that the way definitions work, just because it's called sexuality, it's sexuality meaning what kind of sex, like anything involving it. So that
Mm-hmm.
means not having it, having it, having it in a certain type of way, all of that. They just feel like it's specifically about having sex, and that's the whole definition. And it's like, how hard is it
Right.
to just Google the definition? Why is that so hard? Why don't people Google things anymore? Am I
And
crazy?
it's
Or
so
do people
quick.
just not use Google now?
And like it's never been easier. Like you used to have to like, you know, go to the library and get in the card catalog and get them Dewey Decimals and like really go through it to like look up a fact. Now we have these fun little doohickeys and just like this quick, I could just have in front of me a definition for anything and then like, oh look, we did it. Like that's all. It's not I don't know why people ever run into situations in this day and age where they don't know something that's as, you know, quick as a definition. They don't just like, oh, look it up and then you've got it. Um, I've had so many dumb conversations on the internet that basically boil down to this person's too dumb to Google. Like about the Amber Heard trial, this person was saying to me that, you know, her op-ed was her testimony about her abuse by her husband. You can look up the op-ed, which does not reference that relationship
See,
or
this is how
person.
I know people
It's
aren't
still
watching the
up.
trial, because her lawyer read it in the
Yeah,
opening statement. So everyone was like, oh, yeah, the trial said this, trial said that. It's like, if you were watching, you would have already heard word for word what was in the op ed.
right. It's
What is wrong with
it's
people?
like you could be watching it or you could just look it up because it's still up. It's not like it hasn't been removed from the internet or something. Like it's still up.
It's like
It's not
everyone
some
wants
like
to
apocryphal
be
document.
giving their opinions on things and presenting themselves as experts, but they don't want to read. Now they don't even want to watch videos.
Right.
Holy crap.
Even a video of someone reading it to you is apparently too much effort.
Like, do you see me running around saying I'm an expert on brain surgery? No. What sense does that make? Why would I? You going to see me argue online with a brain surgeon? Probably not.
At least not about brain stuff.
Like, seriously,
I mean,
what
I
the
don't like
hell?
looking stupid, you know,
I
like
don't
that would
like
hurt my
looking dumb.
self-esteem.
Like, I want to know what I'm talking about. It's like, I felt like this used to be a common thing, and now people will just like say stuff and they don't like care. I'll be like, yeah, my source is Twitter. It's like, that's not a real source.
No, there's lots of dumb people on Twitter, like you, the person who said that to me.
Oh, I've seen people be like, oh, my source for this is TikTok. And I'm like, okay. Cool.
Oh my
No,
God.
write a
TikTok is a
paper.
source of
No, go
nothing
ahead,
but
write a
propaganda.
paper, and on your resource page, I want you to list TikTok just to amuse me.
I will admit, in college, I did write one paper in which I did cite the lyrics of a Nicki Minaj song. However, the paper was on the Hottentot Venus, and it was about the sexualization of the backside of Black women. So she actually was a source.
That's
Like,
different. People source lyrics, movies, etc. But you know what I'm saying. It's just
oh yeah,
to
I
get your
couldn't resist
opinion
because I can't
from
stop myself.
someone else's opinion who
Right.
just got it from a tiny
Like,
clip of
unless you were going
something
to
they
talk about the
saw.
phenomenon of people being stupid on TikTok, and that was what your research was on, which I'm sure plenty of people are researching that in this day and age. I don't know why you quoting TikTok.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's not even necessarily that there's anything wrong with TikTok besides lack of curation. So anyone can talk on TikTok. Because like, yeah, there are like licensed clinical professionals of various kinds that do make TikToks. However, there's also, you know, somebody's stupid 14-year-old. Like there's
And
anyone's
there's
on there.
also licensed individuals making TikToks who are doing it in the worst way. Like remember there were like
Yeah.
nurses who were making TikToks about their patients faking
Yeah. Faking like heart
illnesses
symptoms, breathing
and faking
issues. I remember
pain.
that. Yeah.
Like nonsense. There's some teachers who are doing the absolute most, like talking about how they came out to somebody's 6 year
Libs of
old.
TikTok be telling the truth out here.
You
These people, even the fact that these teachers have chosen to make public TikToks where they talk about how they discuss their sexuality with the little kids that they teach, um, it blows my mind almost as much that they think it's appropriate to share in a public social media space as it does that they even do it to begin with.
and to be clear, I'm not saying libs of TikTok, you know, obviously they focus on the ones who are typically LGBTQ, but straight teachers shouldn't be doing this. Heterosexual
No,
teachers shouldn't be doing this. And I don't remember
no,
them. I don't remember anything like this when I was growing up, where you knew any
no,
damn thing about who your teacher was married to and
no.
what their
I can
sexuality was
remember
in the
my
third
first
grade.
grade
Like,
teacher
who
got
cares?
married during the school year, which is so her name changed, and that's the only reason we knew because she went from being Miss Grant to Miss Munoz, because she Mrs. Munoz because she got married. That's the only time in elementary school I can actually think of knowing anything about any of my teachers' marriage.
And I say this as someone who was teaching before. I taught Montessori and I also taught like from ages 3 to 16 before. It just does not come up. It
No,
just does not come up. You have your lesson plans and then you teach your lessons. And if like, here we go, every time, like you'll have, hold on. She needs to go out there. My God.
shall we pause recording?
Got it. But yeah, basically I'm just saying that like it doesn't naturally come up. Like I feel like the only time it would ever come up is if you're teaching students old enough to know about sex or whatever, and they bring it up, or they have girlfriends and boyfriends in the
Right.
class or what have you, or they're asking you questions about it. But for you to bring it up to a six a class of 6 year olds, that's weird because
It's super weird.
I can't imagine why you would do that. Like I'm trying
Well,
to
and even if
think
they
of even.
ask, like, imagine you have a 6-year-old and they go, Mrs. Antoinette, like, is there a Mr. Antoinette? Are you married? You could always go, that has nothing to do with spelling, Bobby. How do we spell boy again?
But
And then
even
keep
that,
going with your lesson.
I don't even think it's that bad in that sense. Like if they ask you if you're married and you're like, yeah, sure. I have a husband, I have a wife. Like that's not a big
Right.
deal, but to be
No,
like,
it's
I'm
not.
coming out to my like that's
Right. That's
weird.
weird. It is.
Um, I
And
don't know
like,
why you do that. They don't even know what that means. They're just like,
no.
what? Like, huh? homophobia? Like they don't even know what you're talking about, right?
No,
Like, what are you
right.
talking about?
And like they might assume that you have an opposite sex partner just because 90% of people do. So they might say something like, oh, do you have a husband? And you could say, oh no, I have a wife. But like you said, it would be weird to refer to that as coming out, because
Yeah,
that's just
that's
disclosing
not
a pretty like basic and not that
basic
sensational fact about
information. Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Unless you make it weird. And
I feel
like
like
you would make
there's
it weird if you were to say, hey class, I'm a lesbian. That would make it weird.
yeah, I feel like there's a big difference between being like, oh my, like I've had teachers who would talk about like their husbands or wives or whatever in
Right,
class, where they'd be like, oh, for example, the other day I was with my husband and whatever. It's
right,
that's not inappropriate, right?
right.
But in college, I had this teacher who this professor, sorry, who would talk about like sexual stuff with his husband. And that was not appropriate, but
No, it's not.
he felt like he could because, we were in college, whatever. And he said inappropriate shit to me too.
Yeah.
Um,
And like I had a few like
yeah.
teachers say like in a sexually inappropriate things, and it honestly just made me highly uncomfortable because like my favorite thing about you is not knowing none of that, dog. Like, I remember my high school civics teacher, one day was talking about like marital issues and like being sexually propositioned by students. I guess he didn't have no friends, or maybe he was hitting on me. I don't really know, but this conversation happened like, he asked me to stay after class and this conversation happened. And I remember just being like, wow, I'd love to not be having this conversation or be here. Good luck with that. And if it's causing you a lot of stress to have attractions to students, maybe you should either teach a different age group or just do something else with your life.
And like even for me, like because that's the thing. I think there's definitely ways it can come up and there's different ways you should deal with it though. Because a lot of times kids will confide in you about abuse going on at home and stuff.
And you're a mandated
Obviously,
reporter,
yeah,
so
then you need to report it. So that's important. So they
yeah.
should be able to confide in you in that way. And then also, like, sometimes kids will hear other stuff or from other older kids and they'll be like, what's this? I'm confused. And at
Right.
that point, what I would do, like, if a little kid was telling me about that, I talk to their parents and be like, I think it might be time for you to have the birds and the bees conversation because they know about
Exactly.
this thing. I wouldn't try to have that for them. That's not my business.
Exactly.
That's not my place. Like
That's
the
not
parents
your
should
place.
always be involved in that, in my opinion.
And
I really feel
there's a
like,
lot of sort of weird sort of back and forth about that right now going on, about
yeah,
sort of, teachers disclosing things to parents. But like you said, I
yeah.
think that is, if there is
Because it's not
something,
my kid, it's theirs. I don't get to
yeah.
decide when they
And
learn
like, you don't know
about
what
something
their
like that.
values are, and different families have different sorts of sexual values and that kind of
And
thing. And
different
that's a thing they have a right to
religions
have.
and
Yeah.
different like cultures. Like you
Yeah.
gotta
And then you also
res-
don't want to tell a kid something that could be a problem for them. Because
right.
if they've got like, a kind of background that has very specific, like, let's say you got a student and their family is evangelical and they believe in no sex till marriage, and they tell you that they're, thinking about having sex with their boyfriend or girlfriend. Well, you'll be very glad that you told them that you don't really feel comfortable giving any kind of perspective on that, if the
Exactly.
alternative is you told them, well, get some condoms, go to student health and go for it, and then they're in a situation.
Right. Then parents kicking them out and it's all on
Yeah.
your brilliant teacher. Then they tell, oh, well,
Yeah,
my teacher said go get condoms. And it's like, why are you talking to my child about condoms? And you're in court. Like to avoid all of
exactly.
this, just don't cross these lines. Like
No,
I feel like that's
that's
obvious,
not
but
for you to do. Like,
um
there's no way if I
yeah.
was
Yeah.
like asked a question like that from a student as a teacher, I would feel like it's appropriate for me to to give that kid my sexual values or something like that. Like, if it wasn't something I thought needed to be discussed with parents, I would just tell them I'm not comfortable with kind of getting into that, or it's not really my job or my place to tell you what to do about that. I could suggest to them that they talk to their parents or a doctor, and then I go on doing my actual job.
Exactly. But yeah, it's too much. I feel like it's too much for straight teachers to be doing the most in classrooms,
Mm-hmm.
and it's too much for everyone else too. Just like be appropriate with other people's children.
Yeah. And like, just be
Don't
appropriate in your
step over
workplace,
boundaries, like it's
because
unnecessary.
like it's, it would be weird for you to get into that with your coworkers. So why would it not be twice as weird to get into that with people you work with that are children? Like, there's just no, I know one person who wound up getting hit with a homophobic slur in the workplace. And apparently, like, another one of the people he worked with was gay, and they would like use these sorts of terms or whatever when they're joking around with each other. I'd said before, I think that's overly familiar and sort of inappropriate in that kind of environment. And then next thing you know, here it's coming from a straight coworker at the water cooler, and now you're calling me upset. Well, why did you create this overly familiar situation where it is a thing that you're sort of talking about your sexuality and using this really casual kind of crass language about it, and then get upset that somebody else is doing that? Like, you've established you're comfortable with that, which would be why they did that with you, probably, at least in this situation.
And yeah, it's similarly, like I've dealt with sexual harassment at work before. And apparently some of my male coworkers, this was like my first job out of college, they were using the work chat to like talk about the women, and that leaked somehow to the boss, so they all got like suspended. I never found out what it was they said though, but they were talking about us, and I'm just like, this is half the problem with the being overly comfortable in little water cooler conversations and shit at work. Like, just be appropriate and then you won't run into
Right.
these
Like, what
kind
if
of
we just like
problems.
talked about work, and if you guys like each other enough to talk about all that kind of stuff, you have some drinks afterward and go do that somewhere.
Yeah, I'd literally never be in the situation where some parent could accuse me of talking to their kid, their little 6-year-old, about condoms. Like, that would just never happen to me. I don't know about
Same.
y'all though. Or where
Right.
they'd be
Like,
like,
there's
oh, Miss Antoinette told me that her boyfriend and her were doing this and that, and this is when she came out as a this, and would never happen to me, because why am I
no,
talking to a child about this?
no.
Why do I
And
want to
like,
talk to a kid?
and
What?
like, even if you're directly asked
Weird.
about your sexuality, like if you had, like, let's say you had a third grader ask you if you're asexual, why would you even answer that question? I wouldn't.
How do they know about that? That would be strange to me if a
Like,
third grader
first of
was
all, it
asking me
sounds like
certain
you've been around a
questions.
groomer if you even know all these terms. And second of all, I'm not going to join the crowd of people that are grooming you by talking to you about my sexuality. So,
I was riding a bike in the third grade. Like, what are y'all doing?
right.
I'm sorry. Like, I was reading where someone was like, oh, one of their fourth graders was asking them about like some sexual position. I'm like, what? You're fourth grader? I was like, I was outside playing kickball. What are fourth
Well,
graders doing now?
and
Huh?
the
Like,
answer to that
I'm
is porn
concerned.
exposure. Like, I think on average, boys are being exposed to it around 8, girls 11 these days. So what's happening is, we need to stop leaving them alone with these devices. They ain't got no child locks on them.
Like, we really need to not, as a teacher, you should not be adding into that shit. Like, have it,
No.
if you can't, no one can protect their kids from like TV, internet, for and the media and other kids, but adults should not be helping with that. Don't
Right. At
help.
least don't join them.
Don't make it worse.
Like,
Like, just stop.
thank you for letting me know that you've been exposed to some kind of inappropriate material or person. I'm not an inappropriate material or person. So we're just gonna move on with this
And I'm gonna just
conversation.
let your kid know, hey, for some reason your 9-year-old knows about anal sex. Maybe, maybe check on
Yeah.
that. Like, that
Yeah.
seems off. Um,
I
just
definitely think you should
FYI.
probably like tell parents as an indication somebody's doing something that shouldn't be happening.
Right,
And
right.
like,
The
it's
terms they
also,
shouldn't. Yeah.
yeah.
So.
And like, you know, when it comes to like the red flags for signs of, you know, kids having been bothered in a certain kind of way, precocious knowledge of and interest in sexual activity are like at the top of that list. So the fact that people aren't worried when kids that are too young know about these things is concerning.
And that's another part of being asexual, right? Is that technically kids are. So saying that no one asexual has ever gotten hurt, not quite true, is it?
Exactly. That's a very relevant point. And, you know, it's a concerning thing that our culture seems to be really pushing the message that you shouldn't let a thing like your own personal disinterest stop you from engaging in activity with an interested person. Because like,
And is it a
actually, it should
coincidence?
stop you every time.
Is it a coincidence they're saying that and at the same time trying to introduce sex to third graders? I don't think all of this is happening by accident at the same time. I'm just saying.
You
But
know,
yeah.
and you know, also even certain sorts of medical treatments for certain confusions or issues that a kid might have are known to result in, for a lot of people, a lack of sexual interest. And it's concerning how little of the sort of conversation and debate about this is factoring what that might mean for these people and what kind of world they'll be growing up into.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm actually really hungry, so I'm probably gonna go get me some lunch.
All righty,
And
darling.
yeah, this was a good discussion though, and necessary. I doubt there's a single video like this on YouTube.
Same, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it's just sad. I mean, maybe people need to just educate themselves about consent and how it always applies, no
Mhm.
matter what your sexuality is, because I
Absolutely.
think that's missing from modern conversations about sexuality is people seem to think it just matters less depending on who you are, like what your identity is. And
Yeah,
that's extremely dangerous.
very much so. Let's
Yeah,
not make anyone an acceptable target for any kind of like coercion or pressuring or anything like that.
absolutely. Yeah. So on that note, my stomach's literally growling. I'll go
Well,
find some
feed
food.
yourself, darling.
Yes. This is good.
Yeah. All
All
right.
right.
End recording.
Bye.